Welcome to Life Stories. What happens when a wealthy CEO's daughter goes undercover as a low-level cleaner in her father's company? Emily Carter wanted to see the truth with her own eyes, to understand how people really treated those they believed had no power. But she never expected to face humiliation, cruelty, and a shocking betrayal. However, the tables were about to turn, and justice would soon be served. Stay with us as we uncover a powerful story of deception, resilience, and the fight for fairness. Subscribe to our channel to begin today's story with Life Stories. I took a deep breath as I stood in front of the glass doors of Carter Industries. My father's company, the empire he had built from the ground up. It was a place I had heard about all my life, a world of power, wealth, and influence, but one I had never truly been a part of. Now, after years of studying abroad, after earning my master's degree, everyone expected me to walk straight into a high-level position. That was how these things worked, wasn't it? But my father had other ideas. You won't understand the company from a desk, he had told me. You won't understand it from meetings, reports, or polished presentations. You need to see it from the ground up, from where people don't think you matter. I could have refused, I could have argued, but deep down, I knew he was right. And part of me was curious. How did people treat those they thought had no power? Were they kind? Were they indifferent? Or were they cruel? And so, here I was, dressed in plain clothes, my hair tied back in a simple ponytail. I stepped through the doors, feeling a mix of nerves and anticipation. The air smelled of fresh coffee and polished floors. Employees moved around with purpose, some rushing past without a second glance, others stopping to chat in hushed tones. Near the reception desk, a woman in her late 50s greeted me with a polite smile. "Mrs. Thompson, my new supervisor. You must be Emily," she said warmly. "Welcome. Mr. Carter told me about you." She had no idea who I really was. I smiled. "Thank you, ma'am." "Ma'am? Oh, no. Just call me Carol," she laughed, leading me down a long hallway toward the main office. "You'll be responsible for keeping the place clean, desks, floors, break rooms, bathrooms, nothing too complicated. You'll get used to it." As we walked, I noticed how the employees reacted to my presence. Some barely looked up from their computers. Others gave quick, uninterested nods. And then there was Ethan. He was leaning back in his chair when we entered the main office, his arms crossed behind his head, a smirk playing on his lips. He looked at me, then at Carol. "Office cleaner, huh?" he muttered, loud enough for the people nearby to hear. I didn't react. This was exactly why I was here, to see who people really were when they thought I was nothing. Carol gave a small, disapproving frown but ignored him. "Let's get you settled," she said, leading me toward a storage closet where the cleaning supplies were kept. As I glanced back, I caught the eyes of another employee, Ryan, who had been silently watching the exchange. Unlike Ethan, his expression wasn't amused. There was something else there, concern. Maybe? The next morning, I stood in front of my mirror, adjusting my new uniform. It felt strange. I had grown up in luxury, wearing designer clothes, attending elite schools, never once having to worry about anything as mundane as a work uniform. But this was something entirely different. This wasn't just a uniform. It was a disguise, a shield, a doorway into a world I had never truly seen before. My mother had always reminded me that wealth was a privilege, not a right. Respect is earned by how you treat people, not by how much money you have, she would say. I tied my hair back, grabbed my supplies, and stepped into the office. The shift in the air was immediate. Some people barely noticed me. Others glanced in my direction, their eyes filled with mild curiosity before turning away. But one person, in particular, made it clear that he was not impressed. "Ethan." His voice cut through the air as I walked past his desk. "Ah, the new cleaner," he said, his tone dripping with mockery. "Perfect timing. I just spilled coffee on my desk. Clean it up." I looked at the desk. The coffee cup lay on its side, the liquid slowly dripping onto the floor. From the angle, it was clear, he had knocked it over on purpose. He folded his arms, watching me like I was some kind of entertainment. I could feel the tightness in my chest, the slow burn of anger. But I reminded myself why I was here. Taking a deep breath, I grabbed a cloth and started cleaning. Behind me, I heard a chuckle. "You're slow," Ethan said, shaking his head. "If you want to last here, you better learn to be quicker." I didn't respond. I kept cleaning, kept my face calm, but I felt it, the heat creeping up my neck, the humiliation curling in my stomach. As soon as I finished, Ethan smirked, picked up a crumpled piece of paper, and threw it on the floor in front of me. "Oops," he said with fake innocence. "Missed the trash can." A few people nearby chuckled nervously. Others looked away, pretending not to notice. But Ryan was watching. Our eyes met for a brief second. And in them, I saw it, a silent apology. A quiet discomfort. I smiled slightly, then bent down and picked up the paper. Ethan laughed. "Good. You're learning." As I walked away, I realized something. This was going to be much harder than I had expected. The days passed, and I settled into my role. Every morning, I arrived early, dressed in my blue and white uniform, ready to start the day. I mopped floors, wiped down desks, and emptied trash bins. The work itself wasn't difficult. But what weighed on me was the way people treated me, or rather, the way some people treated me. I had expected a certain level of indifference. After all, in most workplaces, cleaning staff were often invisible. Their presence acknowledged only when their work wasn't done properly. But Ethan made sure I was never invisible. It started with small things. He would deliberately drop trash in places I had just cleaned. If I wiped a desk, he would run his hand over it as if checking for dust. Then smirk and say, "Not good enough. Do it again." He called me in a condescending tone, making me redo tasks for no reason other than to amuse himself. At first, I ignored it. I reminded myself that I was here to observe, to learn, not to react. But Ethan's behavior wasn't just about power, it was about humiliation. And today, he took it to a whole new level. I was in the break room, wiping down the table when he strolled in, holding a plastic bag filled with clothes. Without hesitation, he tossed it onto the table beside me. "Take these to the laundry," he said casually, "and make sure you wash my white shirts properly. No stains. I like them crisp and clean." I froze. I wasn't here to do personal errands. "I'm here to clean the office, not run laundry," I said, keeping my voice neutral. Ethan raised an eyebrow, then let out a dry chuckle. "You're here to do whatever I tell you to do." His voice lowered slightly, just enough to make the moment feel like a test. "Now take it and get moving." Before I could respond, Ryan, who had been sitting at the far end of the room, finally spoke up. "That's not fair, Ethan," he said, setting his coffee cup down. "She's the office cleaner, not your personal maid. You can't send her to do your laundry." Ethan turned his head slowly, smirking. "Mind your business, Ryan." Ryan shook his head. "This isn't right, and you know it." Ethan ignored him and turned back to me. "Well?" he asked, folding his arms. "Are you going to take the clothes? Or do I need to remind you who's in charge?" The room fell silent. I could feel the weight of every stare. I swallowed the lump in my throat and shook my head. "That's not part of my job, sir." For a moment, there was silence. Then Ethan laughed, loud, mocking, like I had just said something ridiculous. "Oh, we have a little rebel here. Huh?" Before I could react, he picked up a cup of water from the table and, without warning, poured it over my head. A gasp echoed through the break room. The cold water soaked my hair, my uniform, my skin. I stood frozen, heart pounding, as the liquid dripped from my chin onto the floor. The room split into two reactions. Some people shifted uncomfortably, turning away as if pretending not to see. Others chuckled nervously, unsure of whether to laugh or feel bad. But Ryan's expression turned dark. "That's enough, Ethan," he said, his voice tight with anger. Ethan shrugged, completely unfazed. "Relax, Ryan. She's just a cleaner. It's her job to handle messes." I clenched my fists, my wet clothes clinging to my skin. Every part of me burned with humiliation. But I didn't cry. I didn't beg. Instead, I did what I had been raised to do. I endured. Taking a slow breath, I grabbed a cleaning cloth and wiped the water off the table. As if nothing had happened. Ryan looked at me with concern. Emily, he started. But I shook my head slightly, silently telling him not to push it. Ethan smirked, clearly enjoying the power he thought he had over me. But he had no idea. His time was coming. The humiliation I endured that day didn't break me. If anything, it made me more determined. But something changed after that moment in the break room. The way Ethan looked at me shifted, not just with amusement, but with something more dangerous. It was as if he had tested my limits and now wanted to push them even further. The days went on, and I kept my head down, working as if nothing had happened. Ethan, of course, didn't stop. He continued his games, deliberately knocking things over, calling me in his mocking tone, making me redo tasks that didn't need redoing. But now, I wasn't just enduring, I was watching. I was learning, not just about Ethan, but about everyone around him. Ryan remained the only one who spoke up when things went too far. Others, like Lisa, a mid-level manager, shifted uncomfortably when Ethan's behavior crossed the line. But she never said a word. There were employees who laughed nervously at his jokes. Not because they found them funny, but because they were too afraid to be on the receiving end. And then there were those who truly didn't care, who ignored everything as long as it didn't affect them. But today, Ethan took things to a darker level. It was late in the afternoon, and most employees were at their desks or taking a short break. I was in the conference room, cleaning up after a morning meeting, when I heard the door click shut behind me. I turned around, and there he was, Ethan. He leaned against the door, arms crossed, his usual smirk in place. But there was something else in his expression now, something that made my skin crawl. You work hard, he said, stepping closer. I like that. I stiffened, keeping my expression neutral. I have work to do. Ethan, if you'll excuse me. I moved to walk past him. But before I could, he reached out and touched my arm. Not aggressively, not forcefully, but with intent. I froze. You know, he said, lowering his voice, I could make things a lot easier for you. I pulled my arm away, my skin crawling. What do you mean? Ethan smirked. I mean, you're new here, but I have influence. I could make sure you get better treatment, better opportunities, maybe even something bigger than this pathetic cleaning job. He leaned in slightly, his breath warm against my skin. All you have to do, he murmured, is make me happy. My stomach twisted in disgust. I stepped back, my heart pounding. No, I said, my voice firm. Ethan's smirk faded slightly, his eyes narrowing. Think about it, sweetheart. You work hard, but no one respects you. I could change that. I could protect you. I clenched my fists. I don't need your protection. His expression darkened. The amusement was gone now, replaced with something sharper, something dangerous. You should be careful how you speak to me, he said slowly. I have a good reputation here. No one would believe a little cleaner over me. My pulse pounded in my ears. But I refused to show fear. Maybe no one will believe me now, I said quietly. But people always reveal who they truly are. And sooner or later, they face the consequences. Ethan scoffed. Big words for a nobody. He yanked open the door and stepped past me, his shoulder knocking into mine. Before leaving, he turned back, his smirk returning. You'll regret this, he said. And then he was gone. I let out a shaky breath, gripping the cleaning cloth in my hand so tightly my knuckles turned white. I had seen enough. As I left the room, I noticed the faces of the employees outside. Some looked at me with sympathy. Others avoided my gaze, pretending they hadn't seen anything. But a few, like Ryan, watched Ethan with narrowed eyes, clearly disgusted. Not everyone in this office was blind to his actions. Some were simply afraid to speak out. But they wouldn't have to be afraid for much longer, because his time was running out. The day of the general staff meeting arrived, and the tension in the air was palpable. Employees filed into the conference room, expecting a routine announcement. Ethan, as always, walked in with his overconfident smirk, completely unaware that his world was about to collapse. At exactly 10 a.m., my father, Richard Carter, the CEO of Carter Industries, entered the room. Conversations died down as he took his place at the head of the table. But before he could speak, Ethan turned to me, his smirk widening. "Why is she here?" he scoffed. "This meeting is for important people." My father's gaze hardened. "You've said enough, Ethan." Silence fell. The doubt crept into Ethan's expression for the first time. Calmly, my father continued, "For months now, I've been preparing for a major transition. As many of you know, I will be retiring soon. And I have carefully selected my successor." Ethan straightened up, clearly believing his name was about to be called. Instead, my father turned to me. "My successor is Emily Carter." Gasps filled the room. Ethan went pale. "What?" he stammered. "She is not just anything," my father said firmly. "She is my daughter. And she has been working undercover to observe the true nature of this company." The realization hit Ethan like a crashing wave. Every insult, every humiliation, he had directed them at the one person he should have feared most. Effective immediately. "Ethan, you are fired," my father declared. "And for your misconduct, authorities have been notified." The doors swung open, and 2 officers stepped inside. Ethan's face crumbled as he was led away, his pleas ignored. As I took my place at the head of the table, I spoke clearly. This company will be built on fairness, respect, and integrity. No one will be judged by their title, but by their actions. A new chapter had begun. Subscribe to our channel for more life-changing stories.